So those of you who might remember my old videos that I did in response to Jason Unruhe, which was more in relation to with the whole capitalism and fascism topic. Well, this time I've been requested to do a video response in relation to with the automation. Now, just have a listen to what he says here.
When it comes to talking about Marxism and technological innovation, the conversation has been completely dominated by the idea of automation. What's going to happen when everything is automated and you don't need labor anymore?
So you hear this argument all the time to do with this automation. It's this idea that the automation would just take all the jobs. They used the same claims during the Industrial Revolution. They would take all the jobs and the machines would just take all. The fact of the matter is it never happened. In fact, more and more jobs were actually created than those that were lost. And we've been seeing this for decades, not just throughout the Industrial Revolution, but you've seen it right up to even this very day. You've actually been seeing more and more job creation. If there's any job losses as a result in automation taking place, there's actually an argument to use there to say that government's regulation is causing harm. A good example of that are these self-driving motors. So as a result of that, government has stepped in with regulation and has actually destroyed jobs. And we see it with a company like Amazon. Amazon turned towards automation. Why is it turned towards automation? In response to what government's regulations done. These companies would more than love to hire the lower skilled workers, but because of government's regulation, it's forced them into a position where they've got no choice of the matter to turn around and turn to the automation, just like Amazon did. So you can see that government is actually the one creating a problem in terms of unemployment, but it just isn't a case that automation just takes all and then there's no jobs left for anybody, and it's just a case that you're left with nothing. So as I've used an argument before in the past, and I've mentioned it even in a video today with the economic calculation problem, I mentioned about scarcity. So this is the first problem. People's expectations far exceed what's actually available to them. First of all, in order for things to come to existence, there needs to be consumer demand, doesn't there? Consumers are the ones that in demand of whatever's to be produced, so they need money in their pockets. It's not just a case that the money just lands there in their pockets and that's it. And in order for the capitalists themselves to get money in return, their profits, they're going to need to, produce things on consumers' demand. If these consumers are going to need money in their pockets, they're going to need jobs. Yeah, I would admit technology is improving all the time. If there's one thing, and I even mentioned it in the video today with the economic calculation problem, I says that technology can't read people's minds. You could think of a situation and you could think of something like China, maybe if that's something you favour, and Jason Unruhe, of course, he probably would favour something like that. It basically analyses your every move, which is a scary thing to even think about, right? It's straight out the book of 1984. That's really the only way that you're going to get around things, and most folk don't want that. But even then, there's a large scale inefficiency with China with regards to its productivity, and that's not a sign of a successful economy. Technology is never going to be able to read the human mind. The human mind is more powerful than what you could ever imagine. The only way that you're ever going to do something is if you actually, physically open somebody's head. I suppose if you want to rewire people's brains and everything, then fair enough. You've got to remember is the fact that when you are productive, right, the more productive you become in, say, one part of the economy, it opens up, resources and, of course, labour in other parts of the economy. The economy is ever changing, it's always changing, the market's always changing, and that's just something he doesn't understand. Have a listen to what he says next.
I want to start a conversation about it because I think it's tremendously important, and frankly, I think it blows automation out of the water in terms of technology and its relation to the working class.
Who is going to regulate the regulators? Well, who's going to regulate the automation? So the way I look at it is the fact that the way automation is going at the moment is very controlled. It doesn't sound like something that leave just be to itself, and that is actually, I'd be pretty frightened by that. I wouldn't want anything at all to do with automation being left to itself. And I'll tell you the reason why. What happens if something goes wrong with it? Even if you use that in, for example, security, and it doesn't sound really good, and I think that there will be certain limits with artificial intelligence. I don't think it's just going to be a case that they'll just leave it be to itself.
A bunch of countries are working on AI, and the big race towards AI is underway right now. The United States, China, Russia, Google, Facebook, and even to some degree Canada are now racing to see who's going to build an AI first. On the surface, it doesn't seem like it's that much, like this is a regular bourgeois competition, but look at it this way. There's out there the idea called an AI singularity, that once an AI comes into existence and it's able to increase its own processing power, it's going to be able to double its power at an astronomical rate. I mean, this even like not even counting quantum computing when that comes into existence. I mean, really comes into existence. The AI program will be able to upgrade itself and its own processing power. So you could be looking at a doubling of its intelligence within, 2 weeks, and then after that it can double it in a week, and then a couple of days, and then one day, and then several times a day. What's significant about this is that this AI is going to be able to increase its own intelligence astronomically. Like, it's going to be able to tackle issues, specifically technological issues, and be able to solve things hundreds, if not thousands of years ahead of where we are now.
Again, folk, he doesn't really understand the market. He doesn't comprehend the fact that where productivity comes from. See, when you've got increased productivity, you've got increase in real wage growth. These so-called greedy capitalists they're going on about, right? So-called greedy capitalists need money. Well, where are they going to get the money from? They need something to sell, don't they? So if they need something to sell, if they've produced something they need something to sell, they're going to sell it to consumers. But the consumers need money. And if consumers are going to need money, where are they going to get the money from? They have to work. So it's a case that you've actually got demand there. Businesses will only do such a thing if they see it profitable, right? So if they see it profitable, then yes, they'll bring in automation. Labour is important because that's who drives production. Another thing you need to look at is entrepreneurship and innovation. It's actually down to the human beings themselves that have innovated such technology, that have innovated such automation. So it's more a case that this automation is going to improve our life. So at the end of the day, folk, I couldn't really care less, because the technology is going to improve. It's going to improve people's standards of living.
Think of a brain that can continuously become more powerful and will grow at a mathematical rate because it's a machine. This AI program will be able to outsmart human beings in record time. This isn't necessarily like the Skynet from Terminator. We're talking about a program that is so smart that it probably wouldn't even have to declare war on us. We're talking about going from an average human intelligence of like 100 to several 100,000 in a very short amount of time. Algorithms and whatnot of predictive human behavior and stuff like that. It will be so far ahead of us that it would be like we are Stone Age people compared to it.
Well, Jason, here's the thing. I've seen certain folks supporting socialism, and if you ask me, they're the ones that want to take us back to the Stone Ages. Since the technology exists, since it's improving, where did it come from? It came from obviously the human beings themselves. Maybe you're trying to contrast how intelligent the technology would become, that it makes us look nothing, but you know something, human innovation will always be there, and entrepreneurship, and there'll always be demand for labour. It's down to the very consumers themselves. They actually have to have money in their hands in order to go and spend. Again, I really don't understand what you're coming from. See, if you socialists ever had your way, you'd certainly take us back to the Stone Ages.
But what does that mean for revolution? This thing will be able to predict exactly what we're doing before we even do it. It will be able to coordinate different, say, military functions to the point where it would be literally impossible for us to outsmart it. It would be impossible for human beings to defeat it in combat because it would be able to think and react so fast that we would not be able to keep up with it. Even today's advanced military technology wouldn't even be able to keep up with it.
Here's the thing that I don't understand what he's coming for. He goes on about the AI, but he ignores the fact that it's down to the actual, consumers, down to the actual people themselves, the human beings that created such technology. The technology wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the human beings. So it's the same thing today with the military. Is he saying that, oh well, the AI will just, outsmart us all? But hold on a wee second here. Who's to say that they wouldn't use AI within that of their own military, wired in their own way to suit their own demands. That's the thing that he just completely ignores. It's just almost as if to say that it just came about because of while that popped out the sky. Where does he think the technology came from in the first place? Does he honestly have such a doomsday scenario? Don't get me wrong, maybe there's certain folk out there like that. I've got more faith in humanity than that.
Let's say, hypothetical example, efforts with the LLCO go well, and there's a people's war in some third world country, and they begin struggling against US imperialism. In the next 10 years or so, global warming is going to have such a significant effect that most third world countries are going to be in dire straits.
Oh, here we go again. This whole idea of global warming. For the past 10,000 years, global temperature's been declining, which also widely agreed upon by geologists. Geologists actually down to temperature that drives CO2, not the other way around. Over the course of millions of years, it's been a time cycle. The evidence of that's been so clear, right? Which is just something that just happens naturally. That's not something you're ever going to be able to change. But right now, you're in a cooling period. You only living anywhere near the temperatures of what the average temperature was like more than 2,000 years ago when the Roman Empire was around.
What chance does that government stand against an AI that's several thousand years ahead of it in intelligence and knowledge? Because it's going to be able to just take problems that we haven't solved. Like we'll be able to just give, technological, mathematical, and physics problems to the machine, and it will be able to solve them in mere seconds. What would have taken us 50 years, 100 years to be able to do. What happens then? Let's say this does happen. How much is that AI going to affect our lives? What is that going to mean for revolutionary potential? I mean, this is kind of really scary when you think about it.
Well, Jason, you talk about it's scary and you talk about the artificial intelligence, and I can understand. If it ends up in the wrong place, then certain folk could use it against certain folk. I can understand that that's a problem. However, the problem with this argument is that you're talking about what's scary. We've already seen the history of what your socialism's done. We already seen the Soviet Union. We already seen Cuba. We already seen North Korea. We already seen what China's been doing. Chairman Mao, more than 70 million people were massacred because of him. I mean, more than 40 million died of starvation because of the centralisation of agriculture. And that's not something you're ever going to be able to solve, but you'd probably end up contradicting yourself and saying, oh well, AI will solve it. Well, if you're saying that, then you're contradicting yourself because you're getting that narrative that, artificial intelligence is something wrong. Anyway, folk, he's just going on about a load of doomsday scenario stuff and how it's all going to end up in war, etc. For years, I would say it's more down to the economy and how things would get progressively worse, and there's a gold war that's going on. That's very a serious issue. Paper currency just isn't reliable. As I says, all the course of the past 90 odd years, the Keynesian economics is now starting to really rip its arse, and it's not sustainable. I think that's why they're now talking about the Great Reset, and now they're talking about this communist utopia, which is that's the real scary thing. Here's some of the comments. Pee-wee goes on to mention, I'm so sick and tired of socialists blaming the free market for what government does. The reason why big banks and corporations like Apple, Coca-Cola, Amazon, etc. are so corrupt and powerful is because of government regulations. For examples, subsidies, regulatory capture, occupational licensing, Federal Reserve policies, corporate welfare, taxation funding, intellectual property laws, zoning, permitting, restrictions. You're absolutely right in what you say, and in relation today with the automation, it's the same thing. It actually destroys jobs, it destroys innovation, it's very harmful to the economy. The government's intervention is limited much of the productivity, it's driven up people's cost of living, drove inflation up, it's caused so many other problems, it led to the creation of monopolies, the cartels, the oligopolies, etc. It's not been of any benefit at all, and socialists, and they're very good at this, they always try to say, oh well, This is a capitalist system, this is capitalism. But hold on a wee second here, it's a mixed economy. So socialism has to have its presence somewhere. So you have to differentiate, you have to learn what's the difference between capitalism and socialism. Well, what's the mixed economy? Where is the socialism? And we know the very fact that capitalism's about the market regulating itself, right? That's why they always concede and they say, well, the market cannot regulate itself, it doesn't regulate itself, and then they try to make the excuses for government regulation. So that's them caught out there. And at the end of the day, it's the government's regulation that really does cause so much harm. But I just believe that the market's better off just left be to itself. And a good few examples you could look at, for example, the Great Depression or the banking crisis, and it was again the case that they tried to blame the market for those very issues. I had an argument more recently, and one tried to say, well, it was down to the free market that caused the problems, and I says to him, what the hell is fixing interest rates, fixing the ratio of money and all the rest of that? What's that got to do with the free market? And it's just, what it proves to you is the fact that they don't even know what a free market is. Red Hood goes on to say, America had a mostly direct primary care system in the 50s and it was great. Spending was low, $134 per capita, and the results were amazing. And that's very true. I mean, at the end of the day, despite the fact that there was the AMA monopoly and the AMA intervention, there's certainly problems there. But I remember Ron Paul did mention something about before the 1950s and healthcare was a lot better off than what it is today, and unfortunately that problem is stemmed from government's intervention. And like I says, more and more problems that you see, the more intervention, the more government regulation, and even as I mentioned about that of the insurance, once they start insuring everything, it's just like the costs just drive through the roof and people can't even afford healthcare. Healthcare would be far better off if it was left much simpler. And like I say, that's what you need to do, is get government out of healthcare. Arshinwari goes on to say, don't know what else to write on this subject. My previous posts covered everything, so here is a link to the paper. Hope it becomes useful for the next video on the topic if there is one. Well, of course, thank you for sharing the link in that, and I'll be sure to have a read over it if I get the time to, and it's always there for folk to check out for themselves and they can make up their own minds on that sort of thing. I think I seen something mentioned about mutualism. Again, I'm not really particularly in favour of the left, but I do agree with you on the Austrian school and stuff like that. So thank you for sharing that post, Arsh. Greatly appreciated as always, and your input's always valued. Junaid Hussain goes on to say, hi Scotty, I hope you're well, and this is one of my favourite videos that you have uploaded. I really hope that the direct health care plan does take off in the United States. I hope something similar happens in the United Kingdom. I was going to ask, is there an opinion on the face masks? Personally, I'm against wearing them, although I understand why people wear them. To be honest, I don't think the government has done a good job of handling the COVID-19 crisis, but either way they would have been condemned. It's a very touchy subject. I can understand people have got their own views on that. I can understand where people are coming from. They feel like they're restricted and their freedom's been taken away from them. To be honest with you, I was more concerned about the whole Black Lives Matter thing that was going on, and I'm going to do a video on that soon because I was requested today by a friend of mine. The whole thing here is the fact that it's courteous, I believe, right? Because of the fact people have lost their lives, and I understand elderly, and people could argue, well, there's been a low death rate and all the rest of it. See, folk who talk about the economy, the economic problems were there long before this lockdown came around. Nothing at all to do with the lockdown. All the lockdown done was it accelerated the recession forward. That was never anything at all to do with why you're in this economic mess. You're in this mess because of 90 plus years of welfare statism, social security, NHS. That's the reason why you're in this mess. You're in this mess because of government ownership of, such services. You're in this mess because of all the redistribution of wealth, all in the name of what they call equality. As Pete Ivett goes on to say, great video. I do believe the NHS monopoly is selling tenders out to private business. Bug still under the protection umbrella of state the NHS gets. Business don't give services for free. Services are marked up the costs, whereas a full private services not under a protection of the free market would cut costs. But the medical monopoly of the NHS can't compete fairly. But the more free market business in the medical services would create completion and lower cost to the basics. It's not like they don't have a market for everyone needs to use the service. The fact that the NHS monopoly has created a fear factor of get rid of the NHS would mean no medical treatment at higher prices, means the NHS has become a religion. Think about it, NHS is wasting vast amount of public taxes in a time we can't gather taxes up for all the free stuff in our society. This is the problem. I mean, the NHS really is a monopoly, and you only need to oppose the NHS and you're treated like as if there's something wrong with you. And you ask these people, what's free market healthcare, and I guarantee you they'll point to that of the American healthcare market. Now that's the very reason why I done the 2 recent videos that I did, because you're always going to come across it. You're always going to come across the argument to say, but look at American healthcare costs. And I kid you not, right? I've turned around and I've explained to them in clear English, and I've said to them, the American main healthcare market isn't a free market, it's anti-capitalist. There is actually a free market solution today in direct primary care. Now I've explained that to them, right? I explained it in clear English, and what does the person come back and say to me? They come back and they say to me, but look at American healthcare costs. So in other words, what it is basically willful ignorance. It's a religion. It really is. What it really all boils down to is the fact that they just want to protect socialism. That's what it is. That's what it really all boils down to. I mean, it's no anything else. They just want to protect socialism. Now, to me, I don't even think about ideology. Now, okay, capitalism isn't an ideology. It doesn't matter. I don't even think about that. What's more important is lower costs, is better quality of service, real world solutions to problems. But they're not interested in that. And that's the real problem. And it's like you say, and so long as governments get this sort of monopoly, then it's a serious problem. I even had one person dislike my video on the healthcare, and I'm thinking to myself, surely to Christ you would be interested and you would want healthcare more affordable. What's the problem? What seems to be the issue? And I don't think I would ever get a straight answer to that. Voluntarist Jeff goes on to say, not quite, but just about an ANCAP Scotty. I know. That's the thing, Jeff. Continuously learning, and I continuously improve my own knowledge, and I don't pretend to know everything. I've got great interest in the stuff that Rothbard and that is produced, and I've got great interest in, like I says, my main influence is that of the Mises Institute, especially in economic history. That I can certainly side with you on. I feel in the heart, like I says, I feel I'm an anarchist. Why? Because nothing can rival the free market. So anyway, folk, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's been educational enough for yourself. If you've got anything you'd like to add yourself, feel free to comment in the comment section below. Like the video, share the video, and of course I shall talk to you later. Cheers.